Well, the Reserve Bank will decide tomorrow whether to increase or slash rates for the first time this year. Inflation has fallen to 4.1%, but not close enough to the RBA's wish of between 2 and 3. Joining me now is business writer for the Herald Sun, Terry McCrann. Terry, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. What's your feel? Is it too early to slash rates?
Danica, I think the decision tomorrow is absolutely clear-cut. The Reserve Bank will leave rates unchanged. I personally think that it should cut by 25 basis points. And the reason I say that is because I think it was wrong to increase rates by 25 basis points on Cup Day. So it really should fess up that it got it wrong. We didn't need that extra rate hike, and therefore it's undoing it. But I think that would be a step too far. And the reason I say it should do that is because it thought when it made that rate hike in November that inflation was still significantly higher than it was actually going to be. We got a much lower figure for inflation in the December quarter than the Reserve Bank had been expecting. So it raised rates anticipating it still had a tough inflation problem. Yes, you said inflation at 4.1 is still too high, but it is coming down. It is coming down much faster than the Reserve Bank thought. The important thing about tomorrow, Danica, is not so much the decision in all this, but what the Reserve Bank says. First, what Michelle Bullock says in the statement, the normal statement after the meeting, and then an hour later when she holds the first ever press conference to expose herself to questioning from people like me.
Yeah, see, this is going to be interesting tomorrow, Terry, because they've never done this before. The RBA has never held a press conference after any of its announcements. But tomorrow, Michelle Bullock will have to front the media after they make their decision. Is it fair enough that they come out and explain their decision to mortgage holders and let them know how they've come to that decision?
Well, absolutely, Danica. I mean, it's what every other central bank governor does everywhere else in the world, in America, in the UK, in Europe, and indeed in Japan. But more importantly, I think, at this precise moment in time, we are at this critical pivot point. The Reserve Bank and all the other central banks have spent the last 2 years talking about rate hikes. Maybe we'll have to hike again. Maybe we'll have to hike considerably higher than we think than that rates are now. All the other central banks have moved to a pivot. They've now stopped talking about future rate hikes. They're talking about rate cuts. Mightn't have delivered rate cuts yet, but they're talking about rate cuts. Our Reserve Bank, the last thing it said was in December, and it was still talking about rate hikes. So it's critically important for Michelle Bullock to tell us that the Reserve Bank is now focused on thinking about rate cuts. Won't happen tomorrow, but it should happen not in the too distant future. And then she needs to explain the thinking, because it's a delicate balance. She doesn't want people to think, and particularly homeowners, that rates are going to be slashed and their mortgage repayments are going to be halved dramatically in the course of the year. She has to chart a very difficult course because, as you said, inflation is still too high. And a lot of people out there will say immediately, I'm still suffering from high inflation. It hasn't gone away.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that do think that, Terry. Let's move on to stage 3 tax cuts. Of course, Parliament resumes this week. The Greens have a list of demands to get this through, and the coalition will meet tonight to decide whether to oppose it or not. What do you think they'll do here?
I think they'll end up allowing it to go through, Danica. And when you talk about the Greens having their demands, I'm almost thinking, let the coalition approve. The last thing we want is another Greens-Labor deal where you get all sorts of other nasties. Thank you very much from the Greens. The brutal reality of what the government has done, yes, they broke their promise, but it's a popular breaking of the promise ultimately, because it's taking money from about 5 million taxpayers and giving it to about 11 million taxpayers. And we've seen the polling indicate that, it's a vote winner. Brutally, it's cynical and it's a broken promise, but it is a vote winner. And it's going to have an impact very much because come July 1, 11 million Australians will actually get a rise in their pay, in their net take-home pay when those tax cuts flow through, and they'll have that rise every week, more money in their pay packets every week through to the election next March. Put that together with likely lower repayments on home loans. And it's a fairly seductive package.
It's still a long way away, though. That's, it's still July 1 and hasn't done a lot for his popularity as well, according to that latest news poll. Terry McCrann, we have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us this evening.